So today I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how I make my vocals sound good in my song Be There One More Time with my good friend Duskus.
Wish that I could be there one more time. Wish that I could feel what made me smile. Wish that I could be there one more time.
So the first and most important thing when you're working on vocals is obviously the vocal recording. So for this song I record all my vocals on this microphone. That's a Shure SM7, and for some reason I only like my voice when I sing in falsetto. So what I do is I record everything very close to the microphone and then naturally sing very quiet. So what that does is it creates a very intimate and fragile sound. So now let's go into Ableton and look at how I process my vocals. So as you can see, there's a lot of layers here. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you the processing on the lead vocal and on the vocal bus. So let's start off with the lead vocal, and the dry recording sounds like this.
Wish that I could be there one more time.
So I'm starting off with a standard Ableton EQ, and what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting out the unnecessary lows and just boosting a little bit of the highs to bring out some of the articulation in the recording. Next up, I have a standard Ableton saturator on plus 7 decibels. I'm also reducing the output by 7 decibels. And this may look like a lot, but you have to keep in mind that it's a very quiet recording at moderate gain. So we have a lot of headroom to play around with. And with recordings like this, where you're singing very quiet and close mic, you kind of need some sort of saturation or compression to bring out all those details in the recording. So what I'm doing then is I'm just cutting out some of the mid boominess in my voice and in the microphone with a standard EQ again, and just boosting some more of the highs for the same reason as I did before. Obviously, the shape of these EQs is gonna depend on the sound of your vocal and the sound of your microphone. So next up, I have the Vocal Writer by Waves, and what this does is basically just compressing in a different way. You can literally see the volume slider compress the vocal.
Wish that I could be there one more time.
And this just gives a very natural feeling, and it just tames the peak of the recording without really noticing that it's very compressed. So next up I have this de-esser by FabFilter, and it's called Pro DS, and you can use really any de-esser for this, but the reason I like to use this one is because it has all these different modes. And when you have a recording that's not so clean or not so great, you might run into issues with very nasty S's and just general sibilance. So these modes are very nice to play around with because they definitely make a difference. So that's pretty much it for the lead vocal. And with all this processing, it sounds something like this.
Wish that I could be there one more time.
So that's not very different yet, but most of the magic happens on the vocal bus. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding 2 delay plugins. These are Echo Boy by Soundtoys, great delay plugins. And the first one is a pretty standard delay. It's just an 8 note. I've put it on dual echo. Just a little bit of feedback, and I'm cutting back quite a bit of the lows and of the highs. The second one is more of a slap delay. So it's a very fast 16th note and an 8th note. I've put it on ping pong because it gives quite a bit of a stereo feel to it. And again, I cut back quite a lot of the lows and the highs. Essentially what this is doing is just giving some depth to the vocal without being too upfront in the mix. So next up, I'm going into compression with the CLA2A by Waves. It's a great compressor for vocals. I also love to use the Renaissance compressor by Waves, but this one did the job for the song. So this is just moderate compression, nothing too crazy here, and just to tame the peaks of the recording. What I'm doing here is I'm adding more saturation, and again, this may look like a lot of saturation on the vocal, but you have to keep in mind that with a vocal like this, you need to add harmonic content to make the details stand out and to make it come out of the mix more. Next up, I'm adding more EQ to the chain, and what I'm doing here is I'm just boosting certain frequencies to taste, and again, cutting out the lows after I've distorted and compressed the signal. So again, this depends on the sound of your vocal and your microphone and the way you mix things. These are just some more mixing tools. So I'm going into multiband compression, and this is again just a standard multiband compression from Ableton. I love to use this one instead of an EQ sometimes because it's essentially equalizing and compressing at the same time, and it helps me balance out the sound more. So the next thing I'm doing is adding another EQ, and the reason I'm splitting things up in so many different EQs is because I like to A/B things, and it makes it much easier to hear if you're actually making things better or worse. So what I'm doing here is just boosting frequencies I like and frequencies that I think need to stand out more in the mix. And then lastly, I have another de-esser, the Pro DS by FabFilter. And this is just, again, to tame the sibilants and the S's that are left at the end of the chain. So with all the processing, it sounds like this.
Wish that I could be there one more time. Wish that I could feel what made me smile.
So obviously there's more layers going on here. I have a distorted version of the lead vocal going on here. I have a stereoized version of the lead vocal. And then I have some harmonies, left, center, and right. I just spanned them 30 right, 30 left, and then just one in the center. And then I have a recording of me singing the same lead vocal but an octave down. So everything together sounds like this.
Wish that I could be there one more time.
Now you might have noticed that I haven't used reverb anywhere, and the reason I do this is because I like to keep my lead vocal clean and very direct. So what I do is I use this reverb bus, and I basically use the sound from the vocal bus, and then I just put a Valhalla vintage reverb on this. It's 100% wet, and I make a very narrow EQ, so only a few frequencies are coming through of that reverb. I'm just getting rid of the nasty frequencies in the reverb, and I'm just mixing that into taste, and that's also, you know, depends on your mix, obviously. And altogether it sounds like this.
Wish that I could be there one more time.
So that's exactly how I made the vocals for this song. I hope you guys learned something, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.